Srila Prabhupada explains that the dazzling, glaring effulgence of Brahmajyoti exudes from the supreme planet, Goloka Vrindavan. So rather the Shastras explain that whatever light exists in the spiritual and the material worlds, everything is borrowed from the Brahmajyoti. The light of the sun, the moon. Now the living entity is direly in need of light. Darkness is suffocation. Therefore, we will see everybody in this world runs behind surety, runs behind security, because haziness is very difficult to tolerate. What to say of even no, what to say of darkness? So things are clear. So people run for permanent jobs. People run for surety. People run for security. They keep on securing more and more money so that the security quota or quotient increases. So what people are looking for is clarity, the proper vision. This goes to show that randomness is very difficult to tolerate. Although the materialistic mindset very easily uh, puts up the whole world as a random outburst. But in one's day-to-day life also, one can see randomness is very difficult to tolerate. One doesn't want things to be random. One wants things to be certain. Suppose one is going for a job, he doesn't want that every day that insecurity is there. That will I be sitting there for 8 hours, or will I, as soon as I go, I'll have to come back? Will the job remain or not? Will my salary come or not? Will I get food or not? Will I be accepted in the house or not? Very difficult to tolerate if there is randomness on these grounds. In this way, by introspection, one can understand what is the make of the living entity, what is our make, what is our constitutional need. It is very easy to get bewildered, or it is very easy to live on an intoxicating platform saying, no, everything is coming by chance, nothing is there in this world. But when in our day to day lives we cannot even tolerate chance for a few moments, uh, then how is it that everything can come by chance? We want people to behave on with in fixed patterns. So somebody is a friend, we want him to behave in a friendly manner. If he starts shouting, he starts criticizing, he starts fighting. It's not very palatable. It's very difficult to take it up, is it not? So randomness is not the make of the living entity. That is the point we have to understand. And therefore, this mad chase is there after getting some ray of light here and there, some ray of light. Light is signifying clarity, security, lasting patterns. The more lit, the more lasting. That is what is the craving, and that is what is the surge. But now the problem is that this desperate search to grab some ray of when there is going to be confusion, there is going to be bewilderment, there is going to be haziness. And Prabhupada says in Bhagavad Gita that everything in this world is a source of perplexity for everyone. Therefore, it behooves an intelligent person to approach bona fide spiritual master. So, a small molecule of light ray in a dark environment may not be able to sustain. And that is why whatever be the value of spikes, the integral is always zero. So that is the summarization of material affairs. That material affairs at best leads to certain spikes which do not integrate to any tangible value. So this is the nature of this material world. It's a dark place. Now, why this material world is a dark place, or why there is confusion in this world, uh, that is explained from so the impersonalists, they they make a thorough mistake when they say that this material world is all mithya, is all false. Material world is false, then it would not have any place value. Illusion is what an example of illusion, just like in KGP, the students have the habit of they get addicted to playing, say, video games. They are playing games and are competing on games. No. So now suppose if somebody is a gaming champion, no? He has won various competitions. He's a very high score. He's a very champion. He knows a lot of techniques of the game. In any inter-wing, inter-hall competition, he's the de facto winner, like that. So that does not reflect in any way. I mean, that is not going to reflect in any way in his CGPA. That is not going to reflect in any way in his job. No, right? Uh, Even if he applies to a gaming company, they would be interested in, can you make the game, not that can you play the game. Is it not? Right? That is the point. So this is illusion. There is no place value to it. It's completely illusory ground. So that means whether you have achieved less or more, it doesn't matter actually. But the material world is not illusion. It has a place value. But the point to understand is that the place value is a dependent place value. That is the difference. The place value is a dependent place value. Whereas the spiritual world is Swarat. And therefore, the spiritual land and the spiritual pastimes of the Lord and the spiritual dealings, they have an independent place value. It is Swarat. It is not dependent on anything else. So therefore, the spiritual metrics go absolute and the materialistic metrics go absolutely zero. So dependent means that when the material affairs or the material world or material affairs in general, when they are channelized towards the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, then the material affairs will have place value. That's the point. That's the point. Just like prasad. Prasad is material food initially. But when it is offered to the Lord, it becomes spiritualized. Now, prasad has a potency to purify the heart of anyone who partakes it. But prasad is material. We can give a formula to it. It is no, it is material. It will have some proteins. It will have some carbohydrates. It will have some uh, so on. We can give its organic, inorganic composition, is it not? That is possible. So we can say this is what that food is. It is no protein, carbohydrate, starch, and so on. So we can say this is dextrose, this is saccharine, and so on. So we will say, okay, very spiritual in this. Now, when it is offered to Krishna, that same matter uh, gets transformed into spiritual energy because matter is based on spirit. It's a dependent energy. And because it is a dependent energy, when its roots are activated, then material energy acquires a very powerful place value. So the same is true with any kind of material artifact. Anything, if it is offered to Krishna, it has a place value. So it's a dependent energy. So it is a dependent energy actually. Whereas the spiritual world is independent energy. That means that whenever a spiritual activity is undertaken, it is always going to create the same effect: clarity, purification, transformation, auspiciousness. That's the nature of spiritual world. So any spiritual activity will always lead to the same result. Whereas a material activity, if it is performed without offering it to Krishna, then the material activity will integrate to darkness. So confusion, haziness, degradation, that's darkness. Addiction, intoxication, that's darkness. So the material activity will lead to darkness, whereas spiritual activity will lead to emancipation. So that is the understanding that the spiritual world. Uh, so in one sense, if we see that this is the very understanding of the spiritual world being self-effulgent, the spiritual world being Swarat, the independent factor is the spiritual factor. The dependent factor, the material factor. That means if it is channelized towards the supreme, then the dependent factor lead to an auspicious result. Otherwise, the dependent factor will give some random output, random pattern. So the entire materialistic intelligence is simply bent upon trying to find some patterns in the random displays which the material world shows. They simply do that. So in their attempt to find such patterns, here and there patterns, at best they are able to catch some principle, some spiritual principle, or some portion of spiritual principle, which can give them some alignment, which can give them some auspicious vibe. But that's at best what they're able to catch. Or what they're able to do is, or what is possible is to create a spike that for a temporary time, the uh, a spike experience of happiness or satisfaction. So material world at best can offer spikes. And that's the point. So the spike will not last long. The spike will not serve much. The spike is there. Is it? Just like sometimes in the company, people want to get say promotion, they want to get awards and all that. I saw when I was working in a multinational company. So one guy got the best employee award in front of 5,000 employees. He was the only one who was called, and he was awarded. And what was given to him was a trophy and a certificate. No, that is what was given to him, and he got a promotion. So he was in the air. His feet were not touching the ground. His head was above the clouds. So we were able to see him, but he was not able to see anyone. That way. So, but all this lasted. This was a Friday, and Monday, all that intoxication was diffused. Because I remember Monday morning he was called for a meeting in the war room, and there were further senior managers to him. He was a new recruit, new manager, but then there were, and then he was given very heavy chastisement. That what do you think? Now, you know, you have much more responsibilities now. And he was given chastisement. What do you think that you can now be lazy, cozy, or casual, like that? Now you have to work even harder. You have to work even harder. This guy was not going to his to sleep in his apartment. Whatever that, you know, that apartment, he might have taken some room or something. He used to be so dedicated to the cause of company, and then now he got a full dose. That how you have to be more dedicated. Now more responsibilities. So you need to be really all your inhibitions, all your this thing. You have to be overcome that. Very important. The poor fellow came out with a sullen face. I saw, and I remember that face. So that means all his intoxication, had finished. And the baseline thing was that he had got promotion, but there was no salary increment. Many times companies do that. They give promotion, so you have the next. So you and your job responsibilities increase, but there's no salary increment. This is the kind of spikes that this material world creates. Yeah. This is the kind of spikes which this material world creates. Then what is the fun in making spikes? Uh, but this is how this material world is, actually. In fact, one becomes so much obsessed about these, playing with these spikes, that one doesn't progress any further, and his whole life passes away in that. Just like spikes. The first one is a small child, then he's himself in too much ignorance. Then one is playing with toys, like that, and toys don't last long. And then after some time, actually, one gets children, and then he plays with the children's toys, like that. And then after some time, he gets grandchildren, and he plays with grandchildren's toys, and then the demigods play with him. All that with basically, so such a person is wasting his whole life, actually, because he's just running behind spikes. There is no integral to his life, because all he's running forward is titillations. So which direction to take? The direction where there is the absolute light coming from, and that is the spiritual direction. And that is the spiritual direction. Therefore, self-manufactured and conceived ideologies are not going to work. The epitome of which is demonstrated by the Lord by creating the Brahman platform, literal Brahman platform. That okay, by self ignited and the self conceived parameters, even if you are able to extricate yourself out of the material world, but still you'll be simply coasting along into nothing. You'll be still coasting along into nothing. The positive dimension starts from devotional service. And here it is being explained that the Lord is ever ready to inspire the living entity to take that step, to inspire the living entity to always to awaken his lost relationship, to reinstate the living entity in the spiritual world. The Lord is ever ready. The Lord is ever inspiring to the living entity. So the very existence of the Brahman platform is a proof to this aspect uh, that self-initiated endeavors or self-conceived endeavors in their utmost limit, which is practically impossible, but still in its utmost limit, it will take one to nothing. So it will create a minimally auspicious effect, but uh, a much more phenomenal experience of auspiciousness can happen when one comes on the Paramatma platform, and further when one comes on the Bhagavan platform. So Srila Prabhupada is giving such a beautiful meaning of the word Bhagavan. So the Bha being the maintainer or the guide, and very very beautiful, and Ga meaning the creator, and what was one? Hmm? Beautiful, yeah, the sustainer. Every living being is so Bhagavan. So therefore, the point is that in depending on Bhagavan lies the supreme strength, the supreme nourishment. In depending on Bhagavan. And how do we exercise our dependence on Bhagavan? We exercise our dependence on Bhagavan by devotional service. By offering service, active service to Krishna, we are exercising or activating our dependence on the Supreme Lord. So, so it is this devotional service which is actually keeping this dependence alive. And therefore, Prabhupada concludes that Srishad points this out, that beyond the purview of Brahmajyoti, what one needs is the favor of the Lord and nothing else. And therefore, the devotee, and therefore, Sri Isopanishad is now pointing